To watch more Bhagavad Gita discourse videos, subscribe to our YouTube channel.
My love and namaskar to all who are watching this global Gita convention. I feel it's amazing to think that this prehistoric text, the treasure of mankind, generally we say treasure of our country, but actually it's a treasure of mankind, which was gifted thousands and thousands of years ago in the prehistoric time. It is shining with more and more luster as days pass, and with the present technological advancement, how we are able to reach its message all over the world from so many countries of the world, those who are watching this global Bhagavad Gita. This global has become really global this time because it is not localized in one place. It is seen from people from all over the world. Before I start, generally, I would like to express my gratitude to our Guru, because this knowledge, which always we emphasize that spiritual knowledge is a living knowledge. It's like a lit fire. It cannot be had fully from the book. Book may be a help, but this knowledge, this lamp has to be lit, has to be lighted by the Guru in whom this flame is already burning. So that is how from generation to generation, this knowledge has flown to us for these thousands and thousands of years. We don't know how long it is. So I will recite the shloka in gratitude to our Guru and then start the lecture. Swarajya samrajya vibhutiresha bhavat kripa shri mahima prasadat prapta maya shri gurave mahatmani namo namastestu Punarnamostu Namo Namastestu Punarnamostu. The subject is where lies happiness. Now this happiness is the most ancient quest of human civilization. Right from birth, it is not only the most ancient quest of human civilization. Even for an individual, right from birth, the quest is always happiness. Whatever we do, whatever people act, it is only for happiness. If we think about it, even a child, when it is crying, looking for milk or looking for a fruit or a doll, it is only because he thinks that by getting that I will become happy. Even when we are working in the office or factory or anywhere, we are working to get money. What will we do with the money? Well, we will live comfortably. By that, what will happen? Everybody related to us, my family, will be comfortable. By that, what will happen? The last answer in each case will be, I will be happy. So actually all the actions we are doing, it is only to become happy. but we never look back and inquire that has anybody become happy ever in this world by gaining something from the world. We have seen the richest people of the world. We have seen the most famous people of the world. We have seen the most powerful people of the world. We have perhaps known about the most beautiful people of the world also. Have they been happy? If at all any of them had been happy, it is not because of whatever worldly positions they have. It is because of something else. Any gain from the world can never make us happy. That if we look around, we can easily understand. But the fact is that even then, we believe that what I am doing, it will make me happy. I will become happy by that. Now, it's not true that this problem is anything new. It has been there right from the beginning of human civilization. And it is also not true that it has not been investigated and the solution found. Our rishis, the rishis of India, from the prehistoric time, from the Upanishadic age, which can be 10,000, 20,000, whatever, we don't have the historical record. We have only the record of the knowledge they gain, of the knowledge they have recorded. The experiments they have done in the field of subject, whatever they have recorded, those experimental results are the Upanishads we talk about even now after thousands of years. And there clearly they have noted down the solution, not once, not twice, thousands and thousands of times they have mentioned where lies happiness. Na karmana, na prajaya, dhanena. Many shlokas. It is not from anything, by gaining anything from the world at all. It is somewhere else. They discovered the truth, and this discovery has been recorded in our scriptures. It's an experimental discovery. It is an experiential discovery, and it has been recorded in the scriptures what they discovered. They sang, Anandadhyeva khalvimani bhutani jayante, Anandena jatani jivanti, Anandam pravishanti, abhisamvishanti. How did they sing? They started looking within. Why should they look within? They analyzed whatever we are saying now, and they were truthful to their analysis. When they found that the happiness does not lie in anything in the world, they cannot be permanently happy by gaining anything from the world, then they had full faith in their rational understanding. So they started looking within. And these experiments are also clearly recorded in our Upanishads. In Kathopanishads it is written, Paranchikhani vetrinat swayambhuhu tasmat parang pashyati nantaratman kaschid dhiraha pratyagatmanam aikshad avritta chakshuhu amritatvam icchan. That the Creator has made us always looking outwards, never to look within to see who am I who is looking outward. It is not our fault. It is the way Creator has made us. But certainly Creator also has given us the power to look within. For that we cannot blame the Creator. If you don't look within, then we are to blame ourselves, not the Creator. So the shloka says that there are some dhiras, some wise people, those who understanding that nothing from the world, no gain from the world can ever make anybody happy. Knowing that, they shifted their focus from outward to inward, started looking within. What is that? Looking within to find out who am I, who is the substratum of all the entire experiences of the world we are having. Any experience cannot be had without the I in us. All the experiences are based on that I. So they started looking into who is that I, who is the base, who is the substratum of all these experiences. When they looked within and discovered that I, they got flooded with joy, which they had been looking for, but not knowing where it lay. And in that joy, they sang that the whole creation is actually created out of Ananda. There is a difference between ordinary Sukha, Dukkha and Ananda. Ananda is there in Sukha as well as Dukkha. It is the natural coordinate or parameter or property of the soul, of our inmost presence, our Atma, of our Atma. So when they reached the inmost level, they found that the joy lies there. Now this discovery has been made by them. Very truthfully they have recorded also. And not once, but many, many, many times in so many scriptures. But people never care to know that. The fault lies with us. Even if we are told, then to walk that path, whatever has to be done, we are not ready to do. So should we say that we are really looking for happiness? Or we are happy being all tormented, affected, and with the anxiety, anxiousness, fearfulness and everything? Is it not we are deliberately getting occupied by all the stress and tensions? We cannot blame our forefathers. We cannot blame the scriptures. They have recorded everything. They are only craving for us to give a little sincere attention to that, what they have discovered, what they have gifted for us. Even if we think of every day, whatever is happening, the whole day we are stressed, we are engaged in so many activities. And finally, what do? When we are sleeping, initially we are overwhelmed by all sorts of dreams, which also, they don't make us happy. Some of the dreams are equally fearful as we have fearful or even more fearful than what we have during the wakeful period. So the dream also is not giving comfort to our mind. Maybe the body is at rest, but the mind is still agitated, still affected. As we move from dream to a dreamless deep sleep, then only we get refreshed. If every night we did not have this a few hours of deep sleep, next day we feel tired, we will not be able to work as we do generally. We feel that I had slept very well, I did not know anything. So we never look back or think that how is it possible? When did I have this kind of a restfulness, peacefulness with which I am feeling happy even after getting up? What was the period when I forgot everything? The world was forgotten at that time. So we get the happiness when the world is forgotten. But still, we want to become happy by gaining something from the world, some small things from the world. Even those who meditate and are successful in meditation, when they go into samadhi, the ultimate in meditational experience, they forget the world. It cannot be had as long as the world impressions are still active in our mind. So then we get flooded with bliss. Then again, when we forget the world in meditation also, we get the ananda, we get the bliss at that point. So why are we repeatedly looking for ananda outside? Failing again and again. There is a science behind it. Our rishis, they discovered that our natural state is absolutely fulfilling, blissful state of the soul. But as long as we are distracted from that and we are in the world, we consider ourselves to be a small human being with a small body, small mind, looking for something, fearful of something, wanting to do something to become happy, we actually lose our happiness. We are getting away from our real self at that point. So, the true happiness lies within is the statement not only of the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, which is based on the Upanishads, that is also having the same statement, that also is expressing the same truth. Now, let us go into the Bhagavad Gita, how it is dealing with the happiness and how it is allowing us to go into it. Before that, I would like to tell a story. It is all in the, it's a mythological story, but there are coined with a certain meaning. It is said that the Vasishtha, sage Vasishtha, was the son of the creator Brahma. Now, when Vasishtha was born, when Brahma created Vasishtha, he created Vasishtha as a full knower. He did not have any problem at all. He was absolutely happy. And he was sitting quiet. So Brahma felt that, well, I have created a son, but by such a creation, no purpose will be served. So he puts Vasishtha on his lap, and immediately Vasishtha starts crying. Oh, what have you done to me? What have you done to me? I am suffering, I am suffering. Then Brahma explained to him, yes, it is by my sankalpa that you are, by my wish that you are suffering. Because only when you suffer, you would like to you would like to go beyond the suffering, and you will pursue the sadhana to get beyond suffering. Once you have done and you have crossed over the world of suffering, the ocean of suffering, you will know the path to happiness, the path to liberation. Then only you will become useful for the world, because everybody is crying for solace, crying for contentment, crying for peace, crying for happiness. You will be beneficial to them. The way you have crossed the suffering, you will be able to tell them, share your knowledge with them. It is exactly like that. If suppose we always get into the samadhi and we feel fulfilled, we feel very happy, then is our life meant for always remaining in samadhi? It is not. We have been given mind, we have been given intelligence, we have been given a personality to remain active in the world. So the samadhi forever can never be a solution, but surely samadhi is a help, because that takes us to the source of happiness, that reveals to us that what is our real identity, that we are not really segregated by this small body-mind personality. The real I is the revealer of the whole universe. Not only that, when from that samadhi state we start coming out, in that I, that consciousness, the whole world starts floating. Actually, the whole world impression we are interacting with is actually an impression in our I, in our consciousness, in our real identity. What is that world? The world which contains the external world of objects, the internal world of thoughts, analysis, concepts, all together. The human personality, that my personality also is part of that world which is floating in the consciousness, which is appearing in the consciousness. So when we discover that, then we understand that the Atma is not only going into meditation and discovering our identity there, but our identity is a universal identity in which the whole universe appears to be. So there is nothing other than the I anywhere. Then we work in the world, remaining free, considering everything, everybody to be our soul. There lies the permanent happiness. There lies the non-decaying happiness, incessant happiness. Although this happiness is not like the happinesses we are generally going through. They are all short-lived, they are all fleeting. They are interrupted by the sukha is always interrupted by the dukkha. Dukkha again brings happiness and sukha brings dukkha. This way it proceeds until we discovered the substratum on which sukha, dukkha, both waves are arising. Now let us see how Bhagavad Gita presents this problem and the solution. Bhagavad Gita's one great discovery is that we are always finding fault with the world. Whenever something goes wrong, we condemn the situation or the person or wherever we are, we can condemn we criticize the external situation. But Bhagavad Gita says that it is not so. The world may be anything, but you are getting stressed, you are getting disturbed, you are getting angry, you are getting fearful. It is because of your mind. The world will remain the same world for a knower also. But how is it that he doesn't get affected anymore by the world? It is only by treating his mind's reactions to whatever is happening in the world that he becomes liberated from the world affectations. So there Bhagavad Gita has found out a dual word, that raga dvesha, raga and dvesha. In English, we generally refer to as likes and dislikes, but I would like to change it a little. It is not likes and dislikes, because likes and dislikes will be there for everybody. Will a good person not like anything good? Will any good person want people to suffer and become criminal and all that? It is not so. They will like goodness, they will dislike badness also. But they will not cling to what they like, and they will not hate or be intolerant about what they dislike. There comes the raga and dvesha. Dvesha means hatred or intolerance towards what we do not like. And raga means clinging to what I like. So Bhagavad Gita points out that our senses will constantly interact with the world. And they will create some interactions our senses will like, some interactions our senses will dislike. The raga, dvesha in the senses always will be there. But why should the mind get affected, mind get swayed by that? Why should we get agitated when somebody is abusing us? Suppose somebody is abusing us wrongly. Immediately we lose our self-seatedness. Immediately we get angry and start abusing the other person also. Actually, if he is abusing and it is not true of me, then why should I bother? Why should I get affected? I know that it is not true of me. And if it is true, then I should thank the person that, well, you have pointed out this, I had made this mistake and this defect is then in me. I would like to correct it. So this reaction to the situation, there we lose our self-seatedness and we get swayed, we get overwhelmed by the raga dvesha. There we make the major mistake. That is what Bhagavad Gita points out. The shloka is in the 3rd chapter, 34th verse. Indriyasyendriyasyarthe ragadveshau vyavasthitau tayorna vashamagachet tau hyasya paripanthino. He says that for the sense organs, their reaction, their action and reaction, their interaction with the objects, always there will be raga and dvesha. But what we have to do is tayoho na vasham agachet. Our purpose is to not to get under their sway, not to get overwhelmed by that, not to get won over by the raga dvesha. Then we will lose our path, we will lose our goal, we will be drifting away from the path to auspiciousness. But then how to get rid of it? our mind will always react to that, because this raga dvesha, likes and dislike, it is seated in our mind also, and connected to the mind, it is seated in our buddhi also. The indriyas have to be controlled by the mind has to be controlled by the buddhi, but even up to the buddhi, if it is already corrupted by raga dvesha, then how can we change our personality? How can we change our life, which is always overruled by raga dvesha? So, Bhagavad Gita goes on to tell us that there is a sequence in our personality. Following that sequence, we have to find out the solution. We don't have to find out. The Bhagavad Gita has given not one solution. It has attacked this problem from many, many angles and given so many solutions. They have not given just one key to happiness or one key to liberation or freedom, one key to fearlessness. No. Hundreds of keys are given and they all take us to the same point. So here he is discussing one. Indriyani paranyahu indriyebhyah param manaha manasastu para buddhihi yo buddhe paratastu saha. He says that this is the sequence. He says it is known that the indriyas are very powerful. Is it not? We are always behaving slave to the indriyas. And through the indriyas, we are always slave to the world. The moment something is wrong in the world, we lose our self-centeredness. Is it not our slavery to the world objects, world situations? So he says the indriyas are very powerful, but know that the indriyas cannot work without the assistance, without the coordination of the mind. Indriyebhya param manaha. Mind is superior to the indriyas in the order of their level of leadership. Manasastu para buddhi. Know that even there is something superior to the mind, which is the buddhi. The buddhi has the power to guide the mind. But what we do is that indriyas are dragging by indriyas getting affected by the objects, it is pulling the mind towards outward. That is towards the objects and the likes and dislikes, raga dvesha. And the buddhi also trying to satisfy the mind is pulling the buddhi. So the whole sequence is reverse. The objects, the objective situations are overruling the sense organs are overruling the mind, and the mind is overruling the buddhi, the intellect, the intelligence. This is our fate. So to reverse this cycle, reverse this sequence, what do we have to do? Bhagavad Gita is clearly saying, what do we have to do? He says, Manasastu para buddhi, yo buddhe paratastu saha. Well, our personality doesn't end at the buddhi. Up to the buddhi, all the differential things, all the corruptions, all the effects of the object world, everything is there. But there is something superior to the buddhi also. Yo buddhe parataha, who is even superior to the buddhi. And that is the point we have to focus on. That is, what is that superior to the buddhi? That is the inmost level, the I. We talk about the consciousness, which is not touched, not corrupted by anything of the world at all. Its purpose is only to reveal. It reveals the sukha, it reveals the dukkha, it reveals the goodness, it reveals the corruptions, it reveals the garbage, it reveals the beautiful flower. Everything, it only reveals. Its nature is to reveal everything. So he says that in the next verse he says, Evam buddhe param buddhva samstabhyatmanam Jahishatrum mahabaho kamarupam durasadam. This is 343, third chapter, 43rd verse. Very important verse, both these. Evam buddhe param buddhva samstabhyatmanam Jahi Shatrum Mahabaho Kamarupam Durasadam. He says that Evam Buddhe Param Buddha. Knowing that which is superior to the buddhi, samstabhyatmanamatmana, getting absolutely anchored there, fixed there, you can win over the desires, the likes and dislikes, the raga dvesha, which are otherwise extremely difficult to win over. Jahi Shatrum is the greatest enemy in our personality. It can be won over only giving the guidance to the inmost level, that is, which is superior to the buddhi even. That is the soul, that is the I, that is the consciousness we talk about. Now, how do you, unless we know that, how do you go about it? There is enough evidence and enough direction and enough practices also are given to reach that level. Once we reach that level, oh, I have not asked them to show the slides. They're showing the slides? Okay, I did not see at all. So I will go serially. Sajib can show the slides, yeah. Because I have to look at the camera, I cannot look at the screen. That is, it's both way it is confusing. Okay. So, well, this is a method to win over the raga dvesha. We should remember the gist of it. What is that? The normal sequence is we are, let us accept that we are slave to the world and world situations. Because we consider ourselves to be small, our mind to be small, we are selfish, we are self-centered, we are possessive, we always suffer from the smallness of our personality. So, as our sense organs are always slave to the world actions and reactions, the world affectations, following the senses, the mind is overwhelmed by the world, and following the mind, the buddhi is overwhelmed by the world. So we are all, that the whole personality is becoming slave to the world. In Bhagavad Gita, what are they saying? You invert the whole process. You give the leadership to the master of the chariot. Chariot is this personality, the master of the chariot, the soul, we say, the self, the consciousness, the ultimate, the real identity that we are referring to as I. Actually, we are not knowing who am I. In saying I, without I, we cannot have any experience at all. Throughout the day or even in sleep also, I is always there. Without I, there cannot be any experiences. But not knowing the dimension of the I, we are thinking that this I is associated with this puny body, mind, personality, and it is always small, it is separate from others, it is different like that. But this I, the real identity, is the revealer of the world. The world which contains my body, mind, personality also as a small speck. So can I call this I within the body, mind, personality only? This consciousness is in which the whole world, which includes my body, mind, personality, is appearing to be. So that is the real I. So our anchorage should be in that I. Once we have that anchorage in that, then from there we can master the buddhi, we can control the buddhi will control the mind, and the mind will control the sense organs, our whole personality. Now, you cannot say that, well, we have not experienced this self, so how can we give the leadership on that? Well, we might not have experienced this self, but the self properties we know very well, and we all love to become that. Is it not so? Let us inquire within ourselves. Let us find out whether it is true or not. Are we not all looking for love? Are we not all looking for impersonality, unaffectedness? Are we not looking for an expansion where I become the entire world? The soul is such a thing that it is not personalized with the body-mind personality. It is not getting affected by whatever is affecting our body, mind, and buddhi also. So We all have that inner voice. That is why whenever we do anything wrong or so, if you are more and more you become inward looking, you will find there is something in your mind which is telling that this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. In spite of that, because we are slave to the circumstances, because of our greed, because of our ambition, because of our likes and dislikes, we still ignore this inner voice and go on doing things guided by our senses and the attraction and repulsion of the mind. Anybody can look into themselves and find out. They know, they may not have had the self experience, but they definitely know this truth, because we are that. That's a fact. That is the truth. We are that self which is not at all corrupted by any of the constrictions our mind, buddhi, and the senses are affected by. Those constrictions are not there at all. So this is what it is, that we can know that buddhi, that which is superior to the buddhi, yo buddhehe paratastu saha, and we have to give handle the leadership to that, and then the whole control will be from inward to outward, and we will be functioning as a very integrated personality, a disciplined soul. That is the idea of Bhagavad Gita. Because in Bhagavad Gita, you will find there are instructions how to go into samadhi, how to go into meditation, but that is only very little. The question is that coming out of the meditation, how should you live the life? Because meditational, whatever you are getting, it is also time limited. Once you are coming out into the world, again you will be haunted by all the raga, dvesha and everything of the world. Maybe at a lesser measure, but still we will not attain the permanent goal. So Bhagavad Gita sadhana is mostly to give us most of the scripture is to show us the path where the whole life will get divinized. It is not only in the meditation we have known the soul, but we have to find the soul in everything, every bit of experience. That is Bhagavad Gita's way. So he says that by this process, when we are able to get rid of the raga dvesha, we are no more overwhelmed by the raga dvesha. Second chapter, 64th verse says, Ragadvesha viyuktaistu vishayan indriyaicharan atmavashair vidhe atma prasadam adhigacchati. When we are free of this, free of the control of this ragadvesha, then we will interact in the same world with the same sense organs also. But we will be no longer under the sway of the world. We will no longer be slave to the world. We will be Atmavash, Atmavashir Vidhe Atma. We will be under the control of our inmost self, and all the disciplines and other things we follow, what will guide our activities. They are not external disciplines, external do's and don'ts, nothing like that. He will be guided by the inner harmony, the inner voice, you can say, or the inner tune, the tune of infinite. That will be his guiding force, his guiding path. Prasadam adhigacchati. This prasada Bhagavad Gita uses for Ananda in a way. As the Upanishads speak about Ananda, in Bhagavad Gita, they have not used the word Ananda. This prasada means it will be there in Sukha, Dukkha, everything. When I say this, most of you will not agree. How can Dukkha prasada be there? Yes, Dukkha prasada can be there even more than Sukha. Because dukkha is a state when it takes our mind to a deeper level. And prasada is an uniform placidity of the mind which will always be there. I always give the example of the films, that if you don't enjoy dukkha, then why don't you go and see tragic films? Why didn't you read some of the very famous tragic novels? We shed tears profusely, but again and again we listen to such stories. Again and again we read such stories. Does it not prove that we are enjoying the dukkha? But that enjoyment is much subtler and much better. And what is that? That is the prasada which will be there in sukha, dukkha both. In our case, where lies the trouble? When the same thing which we are enjoying in the film or in the book, if that happens in our family, in our close relationships, then we are not able to have the prasada. that dukkha becomes painful, because not because of the situation, because again our mind is constricted, it is selfish, it is self-centered, it is only looking for its own people, own thing, own property, possessiveness and everything. That causes the suffering, not suffering, but the stress. When we are universal, then all the sufferings of the universe will be ours, all the happiness of the universe will be ours. We will never be stressed by the dukkha at all. So that is the prasada Bhagavad Gita is talking about. Then he goes to find out, to delineate that what is this sukha he is referring to. 6.21. Sukham atyantikam yattad buddhigrahyam atindriyam vetti yatra na chaivayam sitas chalati tatvatah. He says that is the pinnacle of sukha, but it is not, it is atindriyam. It is not to be sensed by the sense organs. It is buddhigrahyam. It is to be known by the buddhi, because it is inner. Only the buddhi will know. That too, it will be known by a purified buddhi. Ordinary buddhi will not be able to. It may have a small glimpse of it, but to get into it, the buddhi has to be purified through the anchorage of the soul. Another point he is showing, that what is this state? He says in the next verse, Yam labdhva chaparam labham manyatena adhikam tataha yasmin sthito na dukkhena gurunapi vichalyate. He says, Yam labdhva cha aparam labham na adhikam tataha adhikam manyate. By getting which we will stop looking for something more gain. I have given the title on the slide, that ultimate gain, end of looking for happiness. Because we are always looking for happiness, looking for happiness. Whatever we do, behind that, if we look into our mind, we will find it is only to become happy. There might be so many steps in between. I want to open the factory because I want the production of making some cars, good cars, we will sell in the market very well, then we will have a lot of money, I will become one of the 10 richest person, and then I will become happy. So actually the ultimate result is, we are looking for, is to become happy. But after gaining, knowing the source of the happiness, getting encouraged in that, we will no longer look for happiness from the world. Does it mean that we will not do anything at all? Yes, we will do everything. Whatever we are doing, we will still do. We can marry, we can have family, we can have children, we can have grandchildren, we can become the richest in the world, we can have factories, we can be a great corporate person, but with one big but. What is that? Not expecting that that will make me happy. Is it not true? Any kind of riches, power, anything, can they make us happy? They cannot. So if we do everything with the only knowledge that we should be rid of the delusion that it is going to make me happy, then everything is fine. Then we will find that the stress also has gone from our mind. We are no longer looking for the joy, looking for happiness, but we are working from joy, working from a cheerful state of the mind. That is the solution Bhagavad Gita is telling us. I would briefly spend a few more minutes on the shlokas, which gives a very deep suggestion. 5.21, the 5th chapter, 21 verse. Bahyasparsheshu asaktatma vindatya atmani yat sukham sa brahma yoga yuktatma sukham akshayam asnute. This verse has to be very carefully read. I have given here endless non-dual joy from Atma to Brahman. What is this non-dual joy? All the normal joys we get, it is through interaction. There is a second. There is something other than me. I am looking for that. I want to eat something, and by eating that I will become happy. I want to love somebody, by loving him, I will become happy. I want to marry somebody, by marrying, I will become happy. I want to play, and by that, I will become a great cricketer or so, and then I will become happy. There is also a second thing. There is a sparsha. Sparsha means touch. Unless there is a second, there cannot be any touch. So, whatever, when our inside, when the sense organs are coming in touch with any experience, external experience, in that, whatever sukha we are getting, happiness we are getting, they are all impermanent, because the world is impermanent. Everything is fleeting. Now, when we become bhashya sparshesu shu asaktatma, when we understand the source of joy is within, and we start coming away from the bhashya sparsha, the outer sparsha, and we start reveling in our soul, then that sukha is the great sukha. They have already said it is the source of all happiness. But there is something still more. He says, Sa Brahma Yoga Yuktatma Sukham Akshayam Ashnute. That is not Akshaya Sukha, because from meditation, when you come out, that Sukha is lost. It is no more there. But when you discovered that the whole world is an appearance in the Atma, there is nothing other than the Atma at all, then all the time everything becomes the same Sukha. Whatever you do, whether it is Sukha or Dukkha, you are in touch with the Atma alone. And that is called the Brahman, which is the substratum of the entire world. So once we once we realize the truth of this universal identity, the Brahman, then the Sukha becomes Akshaya Sukha. Akshaya means there is it is imperishable, it never ends. It is the endless joy. But it cannot be from any object of anything, any object of the world. It has to be a non-dual Sukha, which is always oozing out from our Atma. It is the Sukha in the self itself. Come to the 13th verse, 13th slide. Come to the 13th slide. It is verse number 270. Second chapter, 70th verse, 13th slide. Apuryamanamachala pratishtham samudramapa pravishanti yadvad tadvat kamayam pravishanti sarve sashantimapnoti na kamakami. He says, it is the name I have given is the oceanic ease. It is not just happiness. The ultimate level, we call it sahaja. Sahaja means it's a state of ease. Sukha will come. Yes, you are welcome. Dukkha will come. Yes, you are also welcome. As the Sukha comes, Dukkha also comes. Like the ocean, where the pure water of the pure river of Ganges, Yamuna, everything is flowing, although they are not now fully pure. But the pure streams for all over the world, they are flowing down. Similarly, the garbage from all the nalas, all the drains also are flowing down. But they are all welcome to the sea. And once they meet the sea, they become identical with the sea. The sea never says that I will run with the pure water upward to the Himalayas, or I don't want the drain water, let it keep out of me. It remains equally embracing all that comes to its bosom. Not only that, constantly the sun comes and evaporations take place. The water evaporates and goes up to the cloud. Then with the wind, the cloud goes to the mountain and sheds the rain. That rain comes in the form of a rivulet and completes the cycle. The river comes back and meets the sea and loses its identity. The river also becomes the sea. All the rivers are becoming the sea like that. The whole cycle is getting completed by a sahaja. This is the sahaja tune, the easy tune of nature, the natural harmony of what we call creation or nature. Apuryamanam achala pratishtham samudram apaha pravishanti yadvat. As all the waters are entering the sea is getting full and it is never getting overflowing at all. It accepts everything and allows the evaporation also to take place. Tadvat kamaha yam pravishanti sarve. Like that, all the desireful things, whatever we like, dislikes, everything will come down to us. We never have to run after that. I want this and I want this bhoga. I want to have that. No bhogecha, no particular hankering after happiness or anything. We allow everything. We allow everything to come and allow everything to go. This is the great state depicted by Bhagavad Gita. I am now ready for the question. I could not actually really finish it very well and lost also about 5 minutes or so. I don't know how much in the beginning, but more or less I think I have completed whatever the gist, whatever I wanted to convey. Before the questions, I would like to say that, see, we are not speakers. Throughout the life, as Shruti introduced, that I was a seeker right from birth. And for that, I have taken physics and I have pursued spirituality also. So throughout life, as far back I remember from my age of 2, 3 or 4 maximum, I have been a spiritual seeker. I have been a seeker of truth. I won't say spiritual, I have been a seeker of truth. And throughout life, the whole life of 71 years had been a sadhana. So in that sadhana, whatever I have known to be the best and the highest, we try to share that with the people, as many people as possible. Whoever is there to take it, we want to share it because we know how much of joy, how much of fulfillment it comes from that. So we are like a milk cow. What will that cow do? She will try to shed the milk. Like that, we try to share whatever we have learned from the whole life of sadhana. We want to share it with people. So our question answers are also generally, we say, we don't reply to the question, but we reply to the questioner, because the questions are rising from a mind, and that mind has to be consoled. People are looking for consolation. People are looking for freedom from stress. So what will give them the freedom? That varies from person to person. But in such a program also, where we are not interacting separately with anybody, we have to answer some questions. Somewhere somebody will be benefited by that. With that idea, I am asking Priya to ask 1 or 2 questions, whatever time permits. Okay, I am ready for the question.
My name is Priya Dharan, and I'm coming to you from Los Altos, California. Pranams Nuthan Swamiji. To our viewers around the world, our sincere apologies for the brief interruption you experienced. There was a momentary power outage at our producer's home in the East Coast of America. Makes me wonder if this was intentionally planted by Sri Krishna and Pujya Swamiji, so we could experience here and now the cycle of sukha and dukkha and learn to cope by strengthening our minds. Glad to have gotten back on track to hear that such dukkha is also a prasada, as Nuthan Swamiji said. Ladies and gentlemen in the audience, aren't you, like me, glad to be participating in this Jnana Yajna? Nuthan Swamiji, here is the first question. A seeker states, I noticed how letting go of the fruits of my efforts led to losing my passion and ambition in the arts. I wanted to get away from the crazy competitive energy in this field. Now I'm afraid that I'm mistaking letting go with lethargy and of not following my dharma. How can one really stay motivated and productive after eliminating desire?
Well, actually, desire never helps us to produce what we can produce. It only hinders. That you can always find out. That I can take examples, any number of examples. Suppose a student what he is trying to produce. He should learn, he should, if he is appearing for exam, he should do well in the exam and have the proper result. But what makes desire, what happens because of the desire is that he has a desire for having a first rank or having good result or first division or not to fail, whatever. Parallel to the desire, there will be the fear that if my desire is not fulfilled, then what is going to happen? So actually it makes his mind stressed. He becomes stressful. And in any constricted, stressed mind, nobody can think of producing the best. So eliminating the desire is actually making his mind absolutely stress-free, where he can give the best production. Now, when you say about the art competitive field, there perhaps some correction is needed, because the field of art or science or whatever, it is not a competitive field for a spiritual sadhak who wants to do things without desire in a natural manner. If I am an artist, I should be completely devoted to the art, fulfilling whatever comes out of my mind. Can you think of the temples created in India and East Asia? Now also those temples are existing. Can anybody imagine? Some of them are made thousands of years ago. Can anybody imagine that kind of architecture as well as the sculpture? And some of them are still now scientific mystery, how they have made it. Is the 16th cave of Ellora, or so many others, so many are there. Would it have been possible with a desire? It is not out of desire. I can tell you 100 times that it cannot happen out of desire. The artists were given to art and they have done their best possible way. And in the process, the things have come up. The best production come like that only. If time had permitted, I would have given examples from my personal life in my research studies, how a desire-free mind has given me much more than what I would have otherwise got. During research, I did not have guide for 3 years. The major part of my research, the guide was not here. He used to come once from Canada. Once, maybe one day I would meet in a year. And that was enough for me. I was never disheartened by that. I have never complained that guide has not looked after me or he has neglected me, as all the research scholars say. I would not say that. He has given the best of the guidance whenever I needed them. Rest of the time, I was simply playing with my problem and with the mathematics and looking at the beauty of the mathematics. I used to revel in the beauty of the mathematics, which generated a new set of parameters and which gave rise to a beautiful symmetry in the world, which solved the problems, which I had never thought about. I did not know where from the solution is going to come. It just appeared out of a simple, desireless reveling in the mathematics and the beauty of creation. I think this is enough for you. For an artist, I think this is enough. Next question.
I think all of us understand when you say, would you like to be stress-free? I think everybody would say a resounding yes. So desirelessness equals stress-free is always good. The next question is, I experience bliss when I forget the world during meditation. Can meditation and contemplation lead one to this elusive state of lasting happiness?
No, it is a help. It's a prop. Without that, you will never know what is this absolute freedom from stress. Without meditative experience of samadhi or other rarer meditational experiences also, we will never know that it exists. So it is definitely a great help. It's a great step on the way to happiness. But when you get that in meditation and come away to the world, we have found so many examples where they behave absolutely wrongly in the world. They are still stressed and haunted by so many kinds of wrong behavior and all. So meditation is not the ultimate word. We have to have the knowledge of the truth that I am everything. Atmaupamyena sarvatra samam pashyati yo Arjuna sukham va yadiva dukkham sa yogi paramo mataha. That the sukha and dukkha are the waves in the same ocean. It is the Atma which is there everywhere. Until we realize this Atma, which is the substratum of the entire world, on which the whole world experience is taking place, nothing can be permanent. That can only be the permanent. Permanent means it will not be state dependent. When we are meditating and coming out, we can say on such and such day, such and such time, I had samadhi or I had very good meditation session. So it is state dependent. That means I do not have, I had it. But the ultimate level where we reach a permanent goal, when we say that I don't want anything at all, where I have reached, I don't know. I may have this, I may not have this, I might be this, I may not be this, I don't want anything at all. In Bengali we say, Kichui China. Our Baba used to say, Kichui China. Till that arrives, till that dawns, we will not be permanently fulfilled. Fulfillment comes out of that. Okay, next question. Anything? Time is there? A little time is there. Okay.
I think we have some time. So we have a long ways to go in terms of developing ourselves. Another question from the seeker is, Puji Swamiji says, dispassion does not imply hatred or intolerance towards the world. It stands for constant awareness that everything is perishable and hence cannot be the source of lasting joy. Can you elaborate on this, please?
Yes, because this is another point where there is widespread misunderstanding. Vairagya means, English word is dispassion, and everybody thinks that it means running away from the world, leaving everything, you go away. That is not the Vairagya our scriptures speak about. Vairagya has come from Viraga. Raga means, in a way it is the liking, getting attached to, but the pure meaning of raga is color. Viraga means colorlessness. That means not applying any color. Why are we getting stressed in the world? Because always we are not seeing the world as it is. We are not seeing ourselves also as we are. We are always applying a color of me and mindness. Me and mindness to the objects of the world. This is my child, that is not. Even if two children they fight, we will say that my son has got spoiled by mixing with the other boy. Everywhere we are applying the color of me and mine. That is the raga we are applying to the world. So we are not seeing the world as it is. We are seeing with the color of me and mineness. Vairagya means when we see the world as it is and we see ourselves also as we are, then we call it Vairagya. So it is the absolute highest level of impersonality, impartiality, and I generally describe it as a sky-like mindset. We can still better say that autumn sky-like mindset, that you will feel that sky-like feeling will be there inside. Vairagya means that he will be unaffected by anything happening in the world. Even if the world gets destroyed also, he will not be affected at all. Such unaffectedness is called Vairagya. Will he not be a great performer like that with such an unaffected mind? He will be doing anything, whatever is needed. I think we have crossed the time, no? Any other question?
There is, I think we have a little bit of time. So we have one last question, which is, how do you balance between attachment to duty and detachment from material pleasures associated with that duty?
Detachment from material pleasures associated with that duty.
Coming from that duty.
Can you give an example?
So I think, like, if you say, if I'm trying, I'm putting effort, I'm chasing some goal, okay, I've got to do that duty. I have to be attached to that. Otherwise, I will not fulfill that goal of, let's say, attaining.
Understood. I have understood. This duty we don't like at all. You don't have to do anything in the sense of the duty at all. That is what I'm saying. In the first question also, the artist should remain an artist and pursue her artistry. This duty, as long as, suppose we are in a family, we have to look after our mother and father? Is it a duty? Is it not a common human feeling that you will look after your parents or whoever is there around? Not only parents, if we should look after neighbors, we should look after our countrymen. It should happen natural, out of natural affinity and love. This love is one thing in spirituality which if we can cultivate, then everything. That's simplest spiritual sadhana is to remove our selfishness and incorporate a universal love. That is the simplest possible sadhana, and everybody should practice it. In the name of spirituality, the sadhaks become all the more self-centered and selfish. That is why they are not able to reach the goal. Spirituality means every step of spirituality should make us less selfish, more expansive, more loving for the entire world, not only humankind, but animals, trees, everything we should love, and do everything out of love. Then everything will become so joyful that you don't have to look for joy anytime at all. You will do out of joy everything in that love. That is what God also does. The whole world is created out of love. Love means embracing everything. We think that we look for love from others. Actually, we will never be satisfied by that. And if the other person doesn't love me, then I also do not love him or her. This is not love. This is barter. Actually, the real love is what we love is the love itself. When the love oozes out, when the love flows from our heart, we like that love. We are wrong in associating with that love for somebody. It never necessary to have for somebody. The love is a flowing of emotion from within. Love should always flow out from us and reach anywhere, everywhere in the world at all. So when we go into our mind, we research into our mind, we find that we are deluded. We are looking for love from other person. It is not the real love. It is only a caricature of the love. The real love comes from within. It is a natural parameter, coordinate of the soul. And if we can identify it, then you will be craving to have that love, always to love everybody. It is so joyful, so fulfilling to love everybody that you will be greedy. I will say you will be greedy to love everybody. You won't look for love anymore. The person may be your enemy. He may abuse you also. You will have love for him also. Let us try for such a natural process, natural life, ease. We call it sahaja. Sahaja is the ultimate state in spirituality. Okay.
Beautiful way to end this session. So we all the viewers can feel love for love's sake and radiate that love.
Join our live event on the 10th, 11th and 12th of October 2020. Register at www.globalgita.org.